Hi everyone, welcome today to a Ask an Expert session that we've decided to do. And today I've brought along the fabulous Angie Bolton. Hi Angie, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
So Angie, can you tell me who you are, introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about you?
Okay, so I'm Angie and I'm the Curator of Archaeology for the Oxfordshire Museum Service. And what that means really is I look after all the archaeological objects in our collection, and trying to think, it's about 49,000 objects. So some of them you will see on display at the Oxfordshire Museum, but all the others are in our stores, but I look after them all.
Oh my goodness, that's a lot of responsibility, Angie. And I'm hoping that today you can help us a little bit because we're looking at the Anglo Saxons. So I was wondering if you could maybe tell me who the Anglo Saxons were. Sam, Elijah, and Ruby have got some great questions from a school in Whitney. They've asked where did the Anglo Saxons come from? Where did they live? And when did the first Anglo Saxons arrive?
Okay, well, really, that's quite a hard question to answer, but the Anglo Saxons, don't think of them as a definite group of people. There were lots of different people, there's lots of groups of people. And in the documents and manuscripts that we see, the impression is there's a big migration from parts of Europe into Britain. And there are Angles and Saxons. As archaeologists, in reality, we think there were lots of small groups of people moving across to Britain, going back again, people trading. There was a lot more movement to and fro, but people did settle into Britain.
Okay, so once they've arrived, Angie, I can imagine after that journey they're going to be pretty hungry. And Finley, Amy, and Natalia have all asked questions about food. What did the Anglo Saxons eat and how did they cook?
Right then, so food. Well, I can tell you what they didn't eat is chocolate.
Oh no.
Sweetest food that they ate would have been honey. They would have had honey here. So that's how they would have sweetened their food. But also they would have been growing grains once they've got here and settled, become farmers, grains. And I'm not talking, we'll talk about sort of cereals, but not our breakfast cereals, but they would be making flours into bread, that sort of grain. Also, the animals that they would have been eating are similar today. We eat fish, they would have done. We have beef, they would have had the cattle, and also sheep. They would have been eating lamb as well, just as we do. And the evidence for all those are the bones that are left behind, the bones in their rubbish tips that we get to see. And that's what we have in the museum.
Oh, that's really interesting. And if anybody at home wants to have a go at making an Anglo-Saxon cake, we've made a video the other week, so I'll link to that down below. So Angie, now that they're all fed, they're all happy, let's talk about war and weapons. So I've got questions here from Alex has asked, what was the armour made of? Harry's asked, how did they make their weapons? Charlie's asked, what were their weapons? And then I've got from Kiera's asked, when was the Anglo-Saxons' first shield made? Braden's asked about the shields. So's Ty, she's asked about armour. And Demi-Lee's asked about when did they go to war. So tell me a little bit about their warfare and weapons.
Right then, well, that's a huge topic, but brilliant questions. So, warfare. So, if you think in the Saxon period, and we're talking sort of the 6th century, 7th century, England was lots of little kingdoms, and they would be at war with each other, trying to get bigger kingdoms, get better land, perhaps, and that's one reason, perhaps, that they're fighting. So, the weapons that they're using, first of all, shields. Let's start with the shields. Now, the shields would have been made of wood and leather, predominantly. You don't want them all to be made of metal because they would have been really, really heavy. You can't fight properly with a heavy metal shield. But in the centre, there would be a circular, what we call boss in the centre. So stuck to the shield, it would be circular. But when you look at it from side view, it would have a point and then come out like this. And it would have been used as a weapon as well as a defensive item. And it would have given the shield a bit more strength in the centre of it. And that's called a shield boss. And that really, as archaeologists, is the evidence mainly we get to see of these objects because the leather and the wood usually just rots away.
So I know that we've talked a little bit about in past videos about the Roman shield, and that they had loads of decoration on theirs. Did the Anglo Saxons do the same?
So the decoration that we get to see in the archaeology of sort of Saxon shields, and also this applies to Vikings as well, are small little mounts. Now these mounts would have been of an animal. The animals depicted would have been quite fierce and aggressive. So one that we've got in our collection is a small mount of a fish. Now a fish doesn't sound particularly fierce, does it? But we think it's a pike. Now a pike is quite an aggressive fish. It's got very, very sharp teeth. If it bites you on the finger, it's not going to let go. And also the pike are very protective of their homes. They're sort of quite aggressive and wanted to keep other fish away. So the idea is if you put that mount onto your shield, the person using that shield will feel the aggression of the pike. It will feel the protectiveness of that pike as well. But yes, that's what we see on the decoration on some shields. We haven't mentioned the swords and the spears. Now, I wanted to tell you how to identify a Saxon spear. So you know a spear is a sort of leaf shape. So it's a sort of blade, and at the bottom it will have a socket. So because I'm working from home, the socket really is where the wooden spear goes in. And then you have your spear on here. Now, older spears, the sockets of their spear are solid. So you see this solid rim of this tub here. It's solid. If you have a solid rim and the metal looks a yellowy colour, it's a bronze, it is not Saxon.
So it's not Saxon if it's a yellowy bronze colour.
And if it has solid rim. For it to be Saxon, the metal would have been iron. So now it would have looked like a dark brown, rusty colour. So I've got a piece of paper here. If I just curl it slightly, like this, a Saxon spear, this is where the wooden handle would come up. But the Saxon spear has a slit down the side where it's been curled around. It's not solid like the Bronze Age spears, like this one. So if it's iron and has this split down the side, you know it's Saxon. So have a look next time when you're in museums. Have a look. You'll be able to identify them from this.
That's a really, really interesting way, and it shows their amazing skills in engineering to create a spear in that time as well. That's great. So now moving on a little bit, we've had a question from Henry and one from Martha, and they've talked about what happened to the Anglo-Saxons, because we hear a lot of the time about things called hordes. Can you just explain what hordes are and why we have Anglo-Saxon hordes, Angie?
Okay, so hordes is usually metalwork. Or just maybe somebody's all precious items are worried that they're going to be stolen. So, for example, all your gold work you will get together and you will bury in the ground to hide, with the idea that hopefully you'll come back and get it. So a famous hoard isn't from Oxfordshire, but from Staffordshire, the Staffordshire hoard. And what we think there is there's lots of gold work, and we think that they had a fight, there was a war happening, they were all torn off, helmets and chests, quickly buried, put into a bag and buried, we guess with the idea to go find them again, but they weren't then found until relatively recently. What we have in Oxfordshire, so one example is called the Watlington hoard, and this is a hoard of Viking silver work. We've got silver ingots, coins and bits and pieces, and really the Vikings are hiding their hoards to stop them being stolen. They're hiding them with the intention, we think, to go back and find them, and they would melt down this silver and make more jewellery.
So Angie, Henry has asked, what happened to the Anglo-Saxons? Did they disappear? Are they no longer here? Can you tell me a little bit about that? What happened to the Anglo-Saxons?
Well, what happened really is people carried on living here. Their lives just carried on. They didn't think of themselves as Anglo Saxons to then go back home. England was now their home. They settled here. So life bimbled on, just carried on for the majority of sort of normal people, perhaps like you and I. Just life carried on. Nobody really went anywhere.
So, Angie, you mentioned the Vikings then. Tell me a little bit about the Vikings. I read an article that was really interesting about a skeleton that was found in Oxford that might have been Viking or Anglo-Saxon or something. Can you tell me a bit about that?
Right then, so yes, this Viking, or our skeleton, and we call him SK 1756. That's the number he has. So we got to think of a better name. But he was excavated in Oxford along with, I think it's 32 other males. And the experts, the excavators and the osteologists, that's the bone experts, have sort of dated these skeletons to Viking period. Well, not the Viking period, but as Vikings, and they were probably killed in the year 1002. Now, we know that there were Vikings from the diet that they ate. Scientific study has been done on the enamel in their teeth, so we know where they were from, and also DNA has been looked at. So we know this SK 1756 was from Denmark, and actually in Denmark, a cemetery has been excavated and one of his family members have been found. So it's either his uncle or nephew, grandfather or grandson has been found in Denmark. But anyway, let's get back to the story in Oxford. What's happened there is in the year 1002, Ethelred, the King Ethelred, has got completely fed up with Vikings coming over and raiding England, creating havoc, causing wars and fights. Not all Vikings, though, were raiding. Some Vikings had already settled into England and made it their home, were farming, and it was part of their home, and people sort of got on with them very well. Other Vikings were coming across raiding. And Ethelred kept trying to pay these Viking raiders and say, look, I'll pay you this money, just stop coming over. He would pay them, but they still came over. So he's like, I've had enough. I would want on St. Brice's Day, a day in November, in the year 1002, all Vikings to be killed. Whether they've settled here, whether they've been born here, whether it's raiders coming over. So we think these 33 skeletons that have been found in Oxford, we think they were sheltering in a church. They were frightened by this and sheltering in a church. But all the local people and people who weren't Vikings around them tried to get them out the church, and we think that they burnt the church down to make them run out. And as they ran out, these people were then slain with swords and cut down and killed. The Vikings were then lifted up, probably by their ankles and wrists, and then thrown into a nearby ditch and covered over. And we can tell how they were thrown in because their arms were laid sort of up and their legs outstretched. And over time, they were all covered. Buildings were built over them. You know, people didn't know that they were there until they were then excavated and revealed again.
So I've also heard that this skeleton has some marks on him, which means you can tell a bit about his life and a bit about what he might have been doing or what happened to him. Can you explain that to me?
Right, yes, poor SK 1756. So what I'm going to do is show you how he was, the marks that we see on his skeleton. Right then, I have an apple to demonstrate this. So we're going to pretend this is SK 1756. This poor chap, he comes running out of the church, and with a sword mark, he gets chopped on the back of the head. Okay, so he gets chopped, the sword comes down. Okay, And what we see on his skull is this chop mark here. So that's the bit at the back of his head. There we are. As he was running out, he gets one big cut at the back. It's not just one cut he gets. We have lots of other little cuts coming down here. You think of the sword coming down. And then we see the smaller cuts on the side of his head coming through here. They're not as deep as this one, but you start to see them. And for those cuts, we see that he had 9 cuts on his head. He also had one hole in his spine, and that was probably done with a spear. You can see a sort of diamond-shaped hole on his spine, and that was probably due to a spear. So he really did suffer.
Oh, it's amazing that you can tell so much information from just the skeleton, and the fact that you can relate him to somebody, another skeleton that's been found across the sea, is also amazing. It's a great topic, Angie, and thank you so much for sharing such great information with us. I'll let you now get back to your work, but thank you for answering these questions. Have a great day.
Likewise, thank you very much. Take care. Bye.